Billionaire CEO arrested after affair with president's granddaughter leaked to the media. Billionaire CEO arrested after affair with president's granddaughter leaked to the media. Dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jason Cole's penthouse, painting golden streaks across Italian marble floors. He stood at his walk-in closet mirror, adjusting his navy tie with practiced precision. Every morning followed the same routine. Wake at 5 a.m., workout, shower, dress, review numbers. Structure had built his empire. But lately, that structure had gained new meaning. Jason's fingers traced the edge of his phone, fighting the urge to text Emily. Their morning messages had become his favorite part of the day, though they both knew the risks. "Good morning," he whispered to himself, imagining her smile as she read those simple words. The thought warmed him more than his third cup of coffee. Moving to his home office, Jason settled into the leather chair that had witnessed countless deals and decisions. The morning light caught the silver frame on his desk, his mother's photograph. Eleanor Cole's kind eyes seemed to see right through him, just as they had when he was a boy. "What would you think of her, Mom?" he murmured, touching the frame. "Emily's everything you taught me to value. Kind, honest, brave." His mother had always said true wealth wasn't in bank accounts, but in the richness of one's character. Emily embodied that principle perfectly, despite, or perhaps because of, growing up in the spotlight of American politics. The upcoming board meeting's documents spread across his desk, but Jason's thoughts drifted to their last evening together. They'd walked through a small park at sunset, Emily's honey-blonde hair catching the dying light. No cameras, no pressure, just two people sharing dreams and fears beneath autumn trees. The quarterly projections exceed expectations. He forced himself to focus, scanning the reports. The numbers were impressive. Stock prices climbing, expansion plans ahead of schedule. By any measure, Jason Cole was living the American dream. His watch showed 7:15 a.m. The board meeting would start at 9 sharp. Plenty of time to review the acquisition proposals Robert had prepared. Robert Hale had been more than a COO. He'd been a mentor, guiding Jason through the complexities of corporate leadership with steady wisdom. Jason's phone buzzed. His heart jumped, hoping for Emily, but it was just a standard news alert. He should really turn those off. The constant updates were, the phone buzzed again. And again. Suddenly, it wouldn't stop. Before he could check the notifications, Emily's name flashed on the screen. Her ringtone, the soft piano piece she loved, filled the room. Something was wrong. Emily never called this early. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. The screen was flooding with notification after notification, headlines blurring together in an overwhelming stream. The quarterly numbers forgotten, Jason stared at Emily's name flashing urgently on his phone. In those few seconds before answering, he felt the familiar weight of his mother's photograph watching him, as if Eleanor knew this moment would change everything. More alerts kept coming. His phone was practically vibrating off the desk now, each buzz like a warning bell. Whatever was happening, he knew with crushing certainty that the carefully structured world he'd built was about to change forever. Through the windows, the rising sun continued its steady climb, unaware that for Jason Cole, this ordinary Tuesday morning marked the end of everything he'd known. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter as his finger moved to answer Emily's call. His last clear thought before pressing accept was of his mother's favorite saying, "Character isn't built in crisis, it's revealed." Whatever was coming, Jason would face it with the integrity Eleanor had instilled in him, even if it cost him everything he'd built. Jason's hands gripped the leather steering wheel of his Audi, knuckles white as he stared at his phone screen in the relative privacy of the executive parking garage. Each swipe revealed another intimate photo of him and Emily splashed across news sites and social media. Their private moments, A stolen kiss in a garden, holding hands at sunset, Emily's head resting on his shoulder, now served up for public consumption. His chest tightened as he scrolled through the headlines. Breaking: Tech billionaire's secret affair with president's granddaughter exposed. Scandal: Emily Harper and Jason Cole's hidden romance. White House shocked: first family blindsided by granddaughter's relationship. Security cameras had caught some moments. Phone photos captured others. Each image felt like a physical blow, not for himself, but for Emily. She'd trusted him to protect her privacy, to keep their relationship dignified and discreet. Now her reputation was being torn apart in the court of public opinion. A text from Robert Hale flashed across his screen. Board emergency meeting in 15 minutes. PR crisis team assembled. Get up here now. Jason's finger hovered over Emily's last message from minutes ago. They're saying horrible things. My grandmother won't even look at me. What do we do? The truth was, he didn't know. For the first time since building his company from nothing, Jason Cole felt completely powerless. He'd faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and competitor sabotage. But this was different. This was personal. Camera flashes suddenly lit up the garage's entrance. Somehow, they'd found him. Reporters began streaming in, their voices echoing off concrete walls as they shouted questions. Mr. Cole, how long has the affair been going on? Did the president know about your relationship? Were you using Emily Harper to gain political influence? Jason's jaw clenched. Affair. They made it sound sordid when in reality. He closed his eyes, remembering Emily's laugh, her passion for helping others, the way she saw past his wealth to who he really was. More vehicles entered the garage, black SUVs with tinted windows. Federal agents emerged, their movements precise and coordinated. Jason watched through his rear-view mirror as they approached, their badges catching the fluorescent lighting. The reporters surged forward, cameras flashing frantically now. Jason sat very still, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Face whatever comes with dignity, son. Fear doesn't change truth. A sharp rap on his window made him flinch. An agent stood there, badge held up. Mr. Cole, please step out of the vehicle. With deliberate calm, Jason grabbed his suit jacket and opened the door. The agent's face remained professionally neutral as he stated, Jason Cole, you're being taken into custody for questioning regarding allegations of obstruction of justice and attempted suppression of evidence. The accusations hit him like physical blows. Suppression? Obstruction? He'd done nothing wrong, except fall in love with someone the world thought he shouldn't have. Cameras clicked rapidly as agents moved to flank him. The reporters' questions became a roar. Did you try to buy off witnesses, Mr. Cole? Were you blackmailing people to keep quiet? What does Emily Harper have to say about your arrest? Jason stood straight, buttoned his jacket with steady hands. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. As the agents moved to escort him toward their vehicle, his phone buzzed one final time. Emily's message was simple. I love you. Stay strong. He handed his phone to the agent who requested it, then allowed himself to be led through the gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted questions. The morning sun, now fully risen, cast harsh shadows across the garage as Jason Cole, billionaire CEO, son of Eleanor, and the man who loved Emily Harper, was guided into the back of a federal vehicle. The fluorescent lights of the federal building's entrance cast harsh shadows across Jason's face as agents guided him through the double doors. Steel handcuffs bit into his wrists, not painfully tight, but present enough to remind him of his new reality. The marble floor echoed with their footsteps, a sound that had always meant power and prestige, now marking his path to humiliation. Outside, the press corps surged against the barricades. Their shouted questions bounced off the glass facades. "Mr. Cole, did you attempt to bribe federal officials? Was this relationship a calculated move to influence policy? Does the First family consider this a security breach?" Jason kept his eyes forward, jaw set. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Dignity isn't what others give you. It's what you maintain when they try to take it away." The agents flanking him remained professionally detached. Their grip on his arms wasn't rough, but it was firm enough to make clear who was in control. Jason noticed details with an almost surreal clarity. The slightly loosened tie of the agent on his left, the faint coffee stain on the right agent's cuff, the way their shoes squeaked against the polished floor. As they passed the security desk, a young officer stared openly, then quickly looked away. Jason recognized that look. He'd seen it countless times before, but usually accompanied by admiration, not pity. Now he was just another suspect being processed, his tailored Tom Ford suit incongruous with the steel around his wrists. They led him down a corridor where the marble gave way to industrial carpeting. The walls here were institutional beige, lined with unremarkable artwork clearly chosen to be as inoffensive as possible. A clock on the wall read 10:47 a.m. Less than 4 hours ago, he'd been in his penthouse, reviewing quarterly projections and thinking about Emily. Emily. His chest tightened. He hadn't been allowed to call her, to explain or comfort or strategize. Was she watching this circus on TV? Was she facing similar treatment at the hands of other federal agents? The holding room was small, but not claustrophobic, with a metal table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs. One wall held a large mirror that Jason knew was two-way. Standard interrogation setup. He'd seen enough legal procedurals to know the drill, though he'd never imagined being on this side of it. "Please sit, Mr. Cole," the taller agent directed, gesturing to the chair facing the mirror. As Jason complied, they removed his handcuffs with mechanical efficiency. "Someone will be with you shortly to begin questioning." The door closed with a heavy click, leaving Jason alone with his reflection and the faint hum of the ventilation system. His normally pristine appearance was slightly disheveled now, tie askew, a few strands of dark hair falling across his forehead. But it was his eyes that caught his attention. They held the same look he'd seen in them the day he buried his mother. Steady, grieving, but undefeated. A small TV mounted in the corner was tuned to a news channel, the volume low but audible. Jason watched as his own arrest footage played on repeat. The ticker at the bottom confirmed what social media had been screaming all morning. Breaking news: tech billionaire Jason Cole arrested in White House scandal. His mother's favorite prayer came to his lips unbidden, words she'd taught him to say whenever the world seemed too heavy to bear. "Lord, grant me the strength to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I must, and the wisdom to know the difference." The words felt different now, weighted with an urgency they'd never held before. He whispered them again, drawing comfort from their familiar rhythm, from the memory of his mother's voice speaking them with him during storms, during failures, during victories. In the harsh fluorescent light of the holding room, with his empire potentially crumbling and his reputation in tatters, Jason Cole closed his eyes and let his mother's prayer wash over him one more time. Emily Harper sat cross-legged on her cream-colored couch, still in her morning yoga clothes, watching her world implode on national television. Her usually tidy apartment felt like a fortress now, blinds drawn against the reporters she could hear gathering outside. Coffee grew cold in her favorite mug, untouched since the first headlines broke. On screen, a panel of political commentators dissected her relationship with Jason like vultures over prey. The elegant woman in red seemed particularly venomous. "Let's be honest here. This is a calculated move by a privileged young woman who's spent her entire life in the spotlight, The timing, just as her grandfather's administration faces crucial policy votes. Emily's fingers tightened around the remote. She knew she should turn it off, but couldn't look away. Another commentator, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, jumped in. Sources close to the family suggest Miss Harper has a history of attention-seeking behavior. Remember the social media controversy during her college years? That's a lie, Emily whispered to her empty living room. The controversy had been a thoughtful post about mental health awareness that conservative media had twisted into headlines about instability. She'd learned then how easily truth could be reshaped by those with agendas. Her phone buzzed again, the 20th time in an hour. This time it was her best friend, Sophia. They're camping outside my office, too. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? Emily typed back quickly. I'm fine. Stay away for now. No reason for you to get caught in this. The TV switched to footage of Jason being led through the federal building. Even in handcuffs, he carried himself with dignity. Emily's heart ached watching him maintain his composure while reporters shouted accusations. She knew that behind his calm exterior, he had to be thinking of his mother. He always turned to her memory in difficult moments. A breaking news alert flashed across the screen. Emily's stomach dropped as she saw her own face, a photo from last year's charity gala, beside Jason's corporate headshot. Sources within the White House confirmed the relationship between Emily Harper and Jason Cole began months ago, raising questions about potential security breaches and influence peddling. Oh God, Emily breathed, watching as they displayed private photos that had been leaked. Nothing scandalous, just moments they'd thought were theirs alone. Jason kissing her forehead outside a small Italian restaurant, their hands clasped while walking through Central Park at sunset. Each image felt like a violation. The anchors were debating her career now, questioning her role as a social media strategist for non-profits. Can organizations focused on youth advocacy continue to employ someone who's shown such questionable judgment? Emily muted the TV, needing a moment of silence. Her gaze fell on the framed photo of her grandparents on the side table, taken at her college graduation. Her grandmother Margaret stood perfectly poised as always, while her grandfather's smile showed genuine pride. What were they thinking now? The familiar chime of her secure phone, the one for family communications only, cut through her thoughts. A text from her grandmother's assistant. Your presence is required at the White House. 2 p.m. today. Car will collect you at 1:30. Come through the private entrance. Not a request, an order. Emily could hear her grandmother's clipped tone in every word. The same tone that had corrected her posture at state dinners, guided her wardrobe choices for public appearances, and reminded her constantly of what it meant to be a Harper. Her regular phone buzzed with another news alert. Presidential office announces emergency press conference regarding Harper-Cole scandal. Emily closed her eyes, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. In times of crisis, a Harper shows strength through dignity and silence. But for the first time, Emily wondered if silence was just another word for surrender. The secure phone chimed again. Please confirm receipt and attendance. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard as another wave of camera flashes lit up her window blinds from the street below. In less than 2 hours, she would face her family. The weight of legacy, duty, and expectation pressed down on her shoulders as she typed the only response she could. Confirmed. I'll be there. The holding cell's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Jason's face as he waited. The standard-issue plastic chair creaked under his weight, a far cry from his usual ergonomic office furniture. He'd refused to let them take his suit jacket, maintaining whatever dignity he could in this sterile room. Martin Weber, his attorney of 15 years, spread documents across the metal table between them. His normally pristine appearance showed signs of strain: loosened tie, slight wrinkles in his shirt from hours of urgent work. "They're pursuing obstruction charges, Jason. They claim you attempted to suppress the leak of the photos to protect both yourself and Miss Harper." Martin's voice remained steady, professional, though concern flickered in his eyes. Jason leaned forward, his handcuffs clinking against the table. "That's impossible. I never even knew about the leak until it happened. Emily called to warn me minutes before everything exploded online." "I believe you." Martin shuffled through his papers, pulling out a specific document. "But someone went to great lengths to make it appear otherwise. Look at this." Jason studied the paper. Internal emails supposedly showing him directing IT staff to delete server data. His signature looked perfect, but "This is forged," he said quietly. "I never sent these." "I know. The timestamps don't align with your calendar. You were in board meetings when these were sent. But there's something else." Martin lowered his voice. "Our preliminary investigation shows the leak originated from inside Cole Enterprises, specifically from an executive-level terminal." The news hit Jason like a physical blow. He sat back, mind racing through possibilities. Who among his trusted circle would do this? Who had access to both the photos and the ability to forge his signature? "The IT team managed to trace the initial upload," Martin continued. "It came from the executive floor late last night. Someone with high-level security clearance." Jason's thoughts turned to his leadership team, people he'd worked with for years, built the company with. The betrayal stung deeper than the arrest itself. "We need names, Martin." "We're working on it. The system logs were deliberately corrupted, but our tech team is reconstructing them. Whoever did this knew our security protocols intimately." A knock interrupted them. A guard entered with water bottles, a small courtesy arranged by Martin. Jason took a slow drink, trying to maintain his composure as his world continued to unravel. "There's more," Martin said after the guard left. "The timing of the leak coincides with several large short positions taken against Cole Enterprises stock. Someone stood to make millions from your company's fall." "So this wasn't just about exposing Emily and me," Jason concluded. "It was financial." "And personal," Martin added. "The level of detail in these forged documents, the intimate knowledge of company systems. This wasn't an opportunistic attack. It was planned, possibly for months." Jason closed his eyes briefly, his mother's words echoing in his memory. "Truth may be buried, but it never stays hidden." She'd taught him that during his first business crisis, when a competitor had tried to sabotage their early startup. "What's our next move?" Jason asked, straightening his shoulders. "We focus on proving these documents are forgeries. That eliminates their obstruction case. Meanwhile, my team is tracking the money trail from those short positions. Follow the profit, find the betrayer." For the first time since his arrest, Jason felt a glimmer of hope. Not much, just enough to keep fighting. If the leak came from inside, there would be evidence. If someone profited, there would be records. Truth had a way of surfacing, even through the darkest waters. "One more thing," Martin said, gathering his papers. "Emily's statement to investigators completely supports your timeline. She's standing firm despite intense pressure." Jason nodded, throat tight with emotion. In the midst of betrayal, her loyalty shone like a beacon. Whatever came next, they would face it with truth as their shield. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the conference room windows of Cole Enterprises, painting stark lines across Jason's face as he waited. His suit jacket felt heavy on his shoulders, the weight of the day's events pressing down on him. He'd been released on bail an hour ago, immediately heading to the office despite his lawyer's protests. The glass door opened with a soft click. Robert Hale entered, his silver hair perfectly coiffed as always, his movements deliberate and controlled. He'd been Jason's mentor, friend, and right hand for the past decade. the man who'd helped transform Cole Enterprises from a promising startup into a billion-dollar empire. "Jason?" Robert's voice carried its usual smooth confidence. "I'm relieved to see you're out. This whole situation is unconscionable." Jason remained standing, his hands resting on the back of a leather chair. "Is it, Robert?" The conference room felt smaller than usual, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Downtown traffic moved silently 20 stories below, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding above. "I've been reviewing security logs with our IT team," Jason continued, his voice quiet but firm. "The leak came from an executive terminal. Last night, around 11 p.m. Robert settled into a chair, adjusting his tie. "I assume you've called me here because you have questions. Where were you last night, Robert?" "Working late, as usual. You know how demanding the Asian markets can be." Robert's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Are you suggesting something, Jason?" Jason pulled out his phone, placing it on the table between them. "I have the access logs. Your keycard was used to enter the executive floor at 10:43 p.m. The photos were uploaded at 11:17 p.m. from your terminal." A slight twitch at the corner of Robert's mouth was the only indication that the words had landed. "Technology can be misleading. Logs can be altered." "Like the forged emails with my signature? The ones claiming I tried to suppress the leak?" Jason's fingers pressed into the leather chair. "I trusted you, Robert. For 10 years, I trusted you." Something shifted in Robert's expression, a hardening around the eyes, a tightening of his jaw. "Trust," he repeated, almost contemplatively. "Yes, you've always been big on trust. The young visionary, the brilliant CEO who built everything on integrity and innovation." "Why?" Jason's voice cracked slightly. "Whatever issues you had with me, why drag Emily into this?" Robert stood slowly, straightening his cuffs. "You want to know why? Because you never saw it. Never saw how your success overshadowed everyone else's contributions, how your precious principles kept us from dozens of profitable opportunities, how your integrity became a shield for self-righteousness." The truth of the betrayal settled like ice in Jason's stomach. 10 years of mentorship, of shared victories and challenges, dissolved in the face of such deep-seated resentment. "The photos were insurance," Robert continued, his mask of politeness finally dropping. "I knew about your relationship with Emily Harper, kept that information safe, waiting for the right moment. When you rejected the merger last month, a merger that would have made us all wealthy beyond imagination, I realized you'd never change." Jason absorbed each word like a physical blow. "So you destroyed both our lives to punish me for maintaining ethical business practices?" "I leaked the photos to protect the company from your increasingly restrictive moral compass." Robert's voice turned cold, calculating. "The forged emails were simply to ensure you couldn't recover quickly. The charges will eventually be dropped, but by then, the board will have no choice but to make leadership changes." The setting sun painted the room in deep crimson, matching the anger and pain coursing through Jason's veins. Everything he'd built, every relationship he'd valued, tainted by this betrayal. "You'll never run this company, Robert. The truth will come out." "Perhaps." Robert moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "But the damage is done. Your reputation, your relationship with Emily, the company's stock price. Sometimes truth arrives too late to matter." The door closed behind Robert with a soft click, leaving Jason alone in the darkening conference room. The city lights began twinkling on below, a stark contrast to the shadows gathering in his heart. The chandelier cast soft shadows across the White House's private dining room as servants cleared away the remains of a barely touched dinner. Emily sat rigid in her chair, watching her grandmother Margaret sip tea with practiced elegance, as if they were having just another family evening instead of dealing with a national scandal. Throughout dinner, the tension had been suffocating. Her grandfather, the president, had excused himself early, citing urgent matters of state. Emily's parents maintained a strained silence, picking at their food while avoiding eye contact. But Margaret had remained poised, controlling the conversation with diplomatic skill, steering clear of the headlines that were destroying Emily's life. "Grandmother," Emily's voice cut through the careful quiet. "We need to talk, privately." Margaret set down her teacup, the delicate china making barely a sound against its saucer. "Of course, dear. Shall we use the blue room?" The walk through the historic corridors felt endless. Emily's heels clicked against the hardwood floors, each step fueling her determination. The blue room, with its elegant oval shape and harbor views, had always been Margaret's favorite spot for necessary conversations. Once inside, Margaret settled onto a pristine white settee, smoothing her navy dress with manicured hands. "I assume this is about the unfortunate situation with Mr. Cole." "Unfortunate situation?" Emily remained standing, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. "My private photos are everywhere. Jason's been arrested. The media is calling me everything from a manipulative social climber to a naive fool." "Which is precisely why we need to handle this carefully," Margaret replied. "The family's legacy." "Stop." Emily's voice shook. "I've watched you all day, orchestrating everything like it's just another political crisis, making calls, arranging statements, controlling the narrative. But something isn't right." Margaret's perfectly composed expression flickered. "I'm protecting this family, as I've always done. I spoke to Jason's COO today." Emily moved closer, studying her grandmother's face. "Robert Hale. He's claiming Jason tried to suppress the leak, but the timing doesn't make sense. Jason didn't even know about it until this morning." "Mr. Hale seems to have his own agenda," Margaret said smoothly. "We shouldn't involve ourselves in corporate politics." "Except you already have, haven't you?" Emily's heart pounded. "Robert mentioned speaking with a concerned party about the damage my relationship with Jason could do to both our families. He said this person provided him with resources, contacts, timing suggestions." The room fell silent. Outside, the Capitol's lights twinkled like distant stars, oblivious to the painful truth emerging within these historic walls. "You didn't just know about the leak," Emily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You orchestrated it. You used Robert's resentment of Jason to do your dirty work." Margaret set her teacup down with precise movements. "You don't understand the complexities." "Don't." Emily's palm slammed against the antique table, making the china rattle. "Don't treat me like a child who needs protection from the truth. Not anymore." Something in Margaret's carefully maintained facade cracked. Her shoulders dropped slightly, aging her in an instant. "Everything I've done has been to protect this family's legacy, your grandfather's presidency, your future. By destroying the man I love, by humiliating me in front of the entire nation?" "Love," Margaret's voice hardened. "You're young, Emily, infatuated. Mr. Cole, for all his success, represents a risk we cannot afford. His business practices, his stubborn idealism, they make him dangerous to everything we've built." "So you admit it?" Emily felt cold despite the room's warmth. "You worked with Robert to leak those photos?" Margaret stood, moving to the window. The city lights painted shadows across her face as she stared out into the darkness. "Yes," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of decades of similar choices. "I provided Robert with the means and motivation to act. The timing, the narrative, the legal implications, all carefully planned to separate you from a man who could never understand our world." The admission hung in the air between them, transforming their relationship into something Emily barely recognized. Her grandmother, the woman who had taught her about dignity and grace, had orchestrated her public shame with the same precision she used to plan state dinners. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the courthouse steps as Jason emerged, his suit wrinkled from overnight detention. His attorney, David Chen, guided him through the gathering crowd while explaining the bail conditions in hushed tones. Protesters and supporters clashed verbally behind the police barrier, their shouts creating a wall of noise that made Jason's head pound. "Keep your head down," David muttered, opening the car door. "We'll issue a statement later." Jason slid into the back seat of the black SUV, the tinted windows offering brief respite from the chaos. Signs flashed past, some defending his character, others condemning him as a corrupt billionaire. The contrast made his stomach turn. "The bail conditions are strict," David continued, as their driver navigated through the media circus. "No contact with Emily Harper or anyone in the First family. No leaving the state without court approval. Daily check-ins with the bail supervisor." Jason nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his mother's worn prayer card in his pocket. The small piece of cardstock had been his only comfort in the holding cell, reminding him of her unwavering faith in difficult times. "Your assets?" he asked, watching a news van trying to follow their car. "Frozen, pending investigation. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss temporary leadership." David checked his phone. "Your personal accounts should be accessible by tomorrow, but the corporate ones are locked down." They passed the gleaming tower of Coal Enterprises, where more protesters gathered. Someone had spray-painted "corrupt" across the main entrance. Security guards were trying to remove it, but the damage was done. The sight made Jason's chest tighten. "The media's camped out at your penthouse," David warned, as they took a different route. "I've arranged a hotel suite." "No." Jason's voice was firm. "Take me home. I won't hide." The driver made one more turn, and they faced the full force of the media storm. Dozens of cameras surrounded the building's entrance, reporters pushing against the barriers installed by building security. Their shouted questions became a blur of accusations and demands. "Mr. Cole, did you try to suppress evidence? Was Emily Harper aware of the surveillance? Are you planning to step down as CEO?" Security parted the crowd, creating a narrow path. Jason straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The cameras exploded with flashes, every step documented for the evening news. He kept his mother's teachings in mind: head high, shoulders back, grace under pressure. Inside his penthouse, the silence felt oppressive. His phone had been confiscated, replaced with a basic burner for approved calls only. The view that usually brought him peace now felt exposing, like a fishbowl for the news helicopters circling nearby. Jason moved through the rooms methodically, noting the things that suddenly felt hollow: the expensive art, the pristine furniture, the carefully curated image of success. In his study, he found the framed photo of his mother that always centered him. Eleanor Cole's kind eyes seemed to see right through him, just as they had when he was a boy learning about integrity and perseverance. As the day wore on, the media circus outside grew. Every news channel dissected his life, his relationship with Emily, his business practices. Commentators who'd praised him last week now questioned every decision he'd ever made. The isolation began to weigh on him, made worse by knowing Emily was facing her own version of this nightmare across town. By late afternoon, his security team reported that protesters had begun setting up camp outside. The building manager called, politely expressing concern about the other residents' safety and privacy. Even his normally peaceful home had become ground zero for a national scandal. As night fell over the city, Jason stood at his window, watching the chaos below. The media lights created an artificial day, illuminating signs both supporting and condemning him. His phone buzzed. "David, warning him about new allegations scheduled to break tomorrow morning. Looking around his pristine penthouse, Jason made a decision. He couldn't fight this battle from a glass tower surrounded by cameras. He needed space to think, to pray, to remember who he was beyond the headlines. With quiet determination, he began packing a small bag, choosing practicality over luxury. His childhood home, hours from the city, offered something he desperately needed: perspective. The gravel crunched under Jason's tires as he pulled up to the modest two-story farmhouse just before sunrise. The familiar white siding and blue shutters stood unchanged, a beacon of stability in his crumbling world. He sat in his car for a moment, letting memories wash over him. Summer evenings on the porch swing, his mother's voice carrying across the garden as she sang hymns while tending her roses. The key was still hidden under the ceramic bluebird by the steps, just as he'd left it after the funeral 2 years ago. The door creaked open, releasing the musty scent of closed-up rooms. Jason moved through the shadowy house, pulling sheets off furniture and opening windows to let in the crisp morning air. In the kitchen, everything remained exactly as his mother had left it: her collection of mismatched teacups, the well-worn Bible on the counter, even the magnet-covered refrigerator. He traced his fingers over her handwriting on old grocery lists still pinned there, his throat tightening. The stairs to the attic groaned under his weight as he climbed, flashlight beam cutting through dusty air. The box he sought sat tucked beneath the eaves, labeled simply, "Letters Eleanor," in his mother's neat script. He carried it downstairs reverently, setting it on the kitchen table where morning light streamed through lace curtains. Inside, bundles of letters were tied with faded ribbons, organized by year. Some he recognized: correspondence with old friends, thank-you notes from people she'd helped, but beneath those lay a leather-bound journal and a stack of unsealed envelopes addressed to him, dated for various milestones. For your first real heartbreak, when you feel lost, when you need courage. With trembling fingers, Jason opened the one marked, "When your character is questioned." His mother's familiar handwriting filled the pages. "My dearest Jason, if you're reading this, you're facing one of life's hardest trials, having your integrity challenged. I've watched you grow into a man of principle, but the world rarely makes it easy to stay true to our values. Remember what I've always taught you. Reputation is what others believe about you, but character is who you truly are when no one is looking. In times of public shame, the temptation is to fight back, to justify, to let anger shield us from pain. But true strength often lies in quiet dignity and unwavering truth. Your grandfather used to say, 'A tree with deep roots doesn't fear the storm.' Your roots, sweet boy, go deeper than any fortune or fame. They're anchored in faith, honesty, and love. Don't let bitterness take root in your heart. Choose grace, even when it's hard. Choose truth, even when lies would be easier. And remember that no amount of wealth or power can replace the richness of a clear conscience and a faithful heart." Jason had to pause, wiping tears from his cheeks. He could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm, the way she'd sound when teaching him life's hardest lessons. The kitchen filled with morning light as he continued reading. "There will be days when standing alone feels impossible, when the easy path calls louder than the right one. In those moments, remember who you are. Not just Jason Cole the businessman, but the boy who gave his lunch money to homeless veterans, who stood up for bullied classmates, who chose kindness even when it cost him. Success is wonderful, but integrity is priceless. Money can rebuild a business, but only truth can rebuild trust. Whatever you're facing, face it with the courage to be honest and the humility to admit when you're wrong. I may not be there to hold your hand through this storm, but my love and prayers are with you always. Let faith be your compass when the path seems dark. Let truth be your shield when lies surround you. And let love, pure, honest love, be worth fighting for. With all my heart, Mom. Jason sat at the kitchen table long after finishing the letter, watching sunlight dance across the worn wooden surface where he'd done homework while his mother cooked dinner. Her words settled into his soul, replacing the chaos of recent days with clarity and purpose. The path ahead would be difficult, but his mother's wisdom illuminated the way. He would face this crisis not with power or legal maneuvering, but with the simple, unshakable strength she had taught him. Truth, faith, and grace under fire. Emily sat rigid in a high-backed chair, surrounded by the ornate decor of the White House Roosevelt Room. Late afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished table where 3 stern-faced advisors watched her like hawks sizing up prey. "Miss Harper, you must understand the gravity of this situation," said Richard Bennett, the lead communications strategist. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the light as he leaned forward. "The administration's credibility is at stake. Your grandmother's legacy is at risk." Emily's hands remained folded in her lap, her pink nail polish a stark contrast against her navy dress. She'd chosen the conservative outfit carefully that morning, armor against the scrutiny she knew was coming. "We've drafted a statement," said Sarah Mitchell, sliding a document across the table. Her perfectly styled gray hair and pressed suit projected authority earned over decades of crisis management. "It positions you as young, naive, manipulated by an older businessman who took advantage of your trusting nature." Emily's stomach turned as she scanned the carefully crafted lies. The statement painted Jason as a predator, her as a victim, their love as nothing but calculated exploitation. Each word felt like a betrayal. "The timing is crucial," added James Porter, the youngest advisor but no less intense. His tie was slightly askew, the only hint of the chaos these past days had brought. "We need to get ahead of the evening news cycle. Show that you recognize the error in judgment and distance yourself completely from Cole." The room fell silent, except for the steady tick of an antique clock. Emily could feel their expectant stares, the weight of family obligation and political necessity pressing down on her shoulders. "This statement," she began carefully, "it isn't true. Jason never manipulated me. He's one of the most honorable men I've ever known." Sarah's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. "Truth is relative in crisis management, dear. What matters is protecting the presidency, the family name, decades of public service." "The polls are devastating," Richard added, shuffling through papers. "Your association with Cole is dragging down your grandfather's approval ratings. The opposition is already using this to attack his moral authority." Emily stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, tourists snapped photos of the White House grounds, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, remembering quiet moments with Jason in his penthouse garden, his gentle strength, his unwavering integrity. "I understand what's at stake," she said finally, turning back to face them. "But I won't lie. I won't destroy a good man's reputation to save face." "Miss Harper," James cut in, "think about your future. Your career in social media strategy is essentially over unless we reshape this narrative immediately. This statement gives you a path forward." "By throwing Jason under the bus?" Emily's voice rose slightly. "By pretending to be something I'm not." "By being practical," Sarah countered. "This isn't about love or truth, it's about survival. Politics is a brutal game. You've seen that firsthand." Emily gathered her purse, shoulders straight despite the trembling in her hands. "My grandmother taught me that reputation is everything. but my conscience matters more than my reputation. I won't sign that statement." "Emily, please." Richard stood, blocking her path to the door. "At least sleep on it. The pressure will only increase. The media is relentless. Every detail of your life will be scrutinized, every past relationship exposed." "Then let them look," she said quietly. "They'll find someone who believes in love, in honesty, in standing by good people even when it costs something. I can face that truth. Can you face yours?" She left them standing in the elegant room, their protests fading behind her. In the back seat of her car, Emily watched the White House shrink in the rearview mirror as her driver navigated through Washington traffic. Her phone buzzed constantly with news alerts and message notifications, each one speculating about her character, her motives, her future. The sky darkened toward evening. Screens in shop windows and bars she passed, showing talking heads dissecting every angle of the scandal. Emily closed her eyes, exhausted but certain. She might lose her reputation, her career, even her place in the family hierarchy. But she wouldn't lose herself. She wouldn't lose the truth. The fluorescent lights flickered in the shelter's kitchen as Jason tied a white apron around his waist. Steam rose from industrial-sized coffee makers, filling the air with a familiar comfort that reminded him of early mornings at his mother's diner years ago. "First-time volunteer?" asked Martha, the shelter coordinator. Her weathered face and practical haircut spoke of someone who valued function over appearance. She handed him a serving spoon without waiting for his answer. "Yes, ma'am," Jason replied quietly. He'd left his tailored suits behind, wearing simple jeans and a navy sweater that helped him blend in. "I'm here to help however I can. Breakfast starts in 10. We serve about 60 veterans most mornings." Martha gestured to the large pots of oatmeal and trays of toast. "Some are regulars, some just passing through. They don't need your pity, just respect and a hot meal." Jason nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. These men and women had served their country with dignity. The last thing they needed was a wealthy man's condescending charity. As veterans began filing in, Jason focused on each scoop of oatmeal, each piece of toast, each cup of coffee. He met their eyes, learning names, listening more than speaking. There was James, a former Marine with a slight limp who joked about the weather. Sarah, who'd served as a medic, and now helped other veterans navigate the healthcare system. Mike, whose hands shook slightly as he held his tray, but whose smile never wavered. "You're new here," observed an elderly man named Frank, his Vietnam veteran cap worn with pride. He settled at a table near the serving line with his breakfast. "First day," Jason admitted, refilling coffee cups during a lull. "I'm Jason." "Saw you on the news yesterday," Frank said matter-of-factly, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Quite a mess you're in." Jason's hand stilled briefly on the coffee pot. He'd hoped to escape the headlines here, but reality followed everywhere. "Yes, sir, it is." To his surprise, Frank just shrugged. "My wife and I were married 52 years before she passed. Know what she always said? Character shows up in the kitchen, not the spotlight." "Your wife sounds wise," Jason said softly, thinking of his mother's similar philosophy. "Helen worked in a diner all her life. Said you learn everything about people by how they treat others when they're hungry and tired." Frank gestured at Jason's apron. "You've been here since dawn, serving without complaint. That says more than any headline." Throughout the morning, Jason moved between tables, collecting empty trays, wiping spills, listening to fragments of lives lived with courage despite hardship. No one asked about his company or his arrest. Here, he was just another pair of hands trying to be useful. As the breakfast rush wound down, an older veteran named Thomas approached the serving line. His jacket was threadbare but clean, his posture military straight despite age. "Thank you," Thomas said quietly as Jason filled his coffee cup. "Not just for breakfast, for listening to Frank earlier. Really listening, not just nodding along. Most folks see his age and tune out, but you heard him. He reminded me of my mother, Jason admitted. She believed in seeing people, not circumstances. Thomas's eyes crinkled. Smart woman. You know, when everything falls apart, sometimes you need to rebuild from the ground up. Start with the foundation, serving others, telling truth, keeping faith. By dusk, as Jason hung up his apron, his shoulders felt lighter despite his exhaustion. Martha handed him a schedule for next week's breakfast shifts without comment, a simple acknowledgement that he was welcome to return. Thank you for letting me help, Jason said sincerely. Martha's expression softened slightly. Everyone needs a place to stand when the world's spinning. Sometimes that place is behind a serving spoon at 6 a.m. In his car, Jason looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was the same one splashed across newspapers, but somehow different, humbled, grounded, beginning to find solid footing in simple service rather than status. The grand ballroom of the Willard Hotel sparkled with its usual elegance, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over Washington's elite. Margaret Harper stood near a marble column, her silver evening gown perfectly tailored, her posture impeccable as always. Yet something had shifted in the familiar atmosphere of these gatherings she'd navigated for decades. The whispers followed her like shadows. Conversations faltered as she passed. Old friends suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating when she approached. Margaret, darling. Senator Wilson's wife air-kissed her cheek, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Such a lovely event for the Children's Hospital, though I noticed Emily couldn't make it. The question landed like a gentle knife. Emily had prior commitments, Margaret replied smoothly, though they both knew Emily had declined specifically to avoid her grandmother. Of course, dear. These young people are so busy nowadays. The implied criticism hung in the air before Mrs. Wilson drifted away to join a more comfortable circle. Margaret sipped her champagne, the bubbles bitter on her tongue. Across the room she spotted several of Emily's friends from Georgetown days, young women who used to greet her warmly at family events. Now they huddled together, stealing glances in her direction between whispered conversations. Did you see the latest opinion piece? One murmured, not quite softly enough. They're saying the whole arrest was politically motivated. Poor Emily. She always seemed so genuine. Margaret's hand tightened on her glass. She'd attended hundreds of these functions, masterfully working rooms to advance causes and careers. Now she felt like an unwelcome ghost at her own party. A waiter appeared with fresh champagne. Madam First Lady? He offered quietly. No, thank you. The title that once filled her with pride now felt hollow. She caught a glimpse of herself in one of the ballroom's ornate mirrors, elegant, poised, perfectly groomed. The image of propriety she'd sacrificed so much to maintain. Emily's words from their last confrontation echoed. You didn't protect our family, grandmother. You protected your idea of what our family should be. The chamber orchestra began a waltz. Couples moved to the dance floor, but the space around Margaret remained conspicuously empty. She remembered teaching Emily to dance in this very ballroom years ago, her granddaughter's delighted giggles as they twirled between events. Margaret? Congressman Hayes approached, one of the few who still dared direct conversation. Shame about this business with young Cole. These tech billionaires thinking they can do whatever they please. Jason Cole built his company from nothing, Margaret heard herself say, surprising them both. And my granddaughter has always shown excellent judgment in choosing friends. Hayes blinked, taken aback by this departure from the expected script. Margaret felt a sudden, overwhelming need for air. She made her way to a secluded balcony overlooking the city lights. The night air was cool against her face, carrying the faint scent of early autumn. Her phone showed no messages from Emily, No messages from anyone, really. The family group chat had been silent for days. Inside, the party continued. Margaret could hear the muted music, the rise and fall of conversations she was no longer welcome to join. She'd spent her life crafting this world of influence and propriety, teaching Emily the importance of maintaining appearances at all costs. But standing alone in the darkness, Margaret remembered Emily at 5 years old, proudly showing her a crayon drawing. "Look, Grandma, it's us having tea with the angels." That pure, loving heart had Margaret's lessons slowly stripped it away, replacing truth with carefully constructed image? The champagne felt heavy in her stomach. For the first time in years, Margaret allowed herself to question whether she'd confused protecting her family with protecting her own power. The whispers and sideways glances suddenly seemed less important than the memory of Emily's face, hurt and betrayed, at their last meeting. A burst of laughter drifted from inside, but Margaret remained on the balcony, looking out at the city where her granddaughter was somewhere spending another evening avoiding her presence. The afternoon sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored light across empty wooden pews. Jason arrived first, the church's silence wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. He sat in the last row, remembering countless Sundays spent here with his mother before her passing. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Emily slipped inside, her simple sweater and jeans a far cry from her usual polished appearance. Their eyes met across the sanctuary, and for a moment neither moved. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Jason said softly as she joined him in the pew. The space between them felt both vast and intimate. "I had to lose 3 different reporters," Emily replied with a weak smile. "But I needed to see you." The colored light painted patterns across her face, reminding Jason of the first time they'd met at a charity gala. She'd been just as beautiful then, but it was her genuine warmth that had drawn him in. "Your grandmother," he began. "I know." Emily's hands twisted in her lap. "I still can't believe she would—" "Can't you?" Jason's voice was gentle. "She built her life around protecting your family's image. In her mind, I'm probably the biggest threat to that." "It doesn't make it right." Emily's voice cracked. "Using Robert, manipulating the media, letting you get arrested, all to control me?" Jason reached for her hand, then hesitated. "Even here, someone might see." But Emily closed the distance, interlacing their fingers. "I've been reading my mother's letters," he said. "She wrote about moments like this, when doing the right thing feels impossible because every choice hurts someone." Emily squeezed his hand. "What did she say?" "That truth isn't always comfortable, but it's the only foundation strong enough to build a life on." Jason turned to face her fully. "Emily, I won't ask you to choose between your family and me. That's not fair to anyone." "But that's exactly what grandmother did," Emily said. "She made it about choosing sides instead of choosing truth." Sunlight caught the dust motes dancing between them, creating halos in the quiet space. A distant church bell chimed the hour. "I've spent the past week at a veterans shelter," Jason said. "No cameras, no press, just serving meals and listening to stories. It reminded me of something important." "What's that?" "That we're more than our reputations. These men and women, some of them lost everything, but they found their way back through honesty and community." He paused. "I don't want to hide anymore, Emily. Not from the charges, not from the press, not from the truth of us." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "Even if it costs you your company?" "The company was built on innovation and integrity. If I compromise those values now, what's left worth saving?" Emily stood suddenly, walking to the altar. The setting sun streamed through the western windows, surrounding her in golden light. "I used to pray here sometimes, during college," she said, "when the pressure of being the president's granddaughter felt too heavy. Jason joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. What did you pray for? Courage? Clarity? She turned to face him. Love that wouldn't require me to be less than who I am. And now? Now I pray for the strength to stand in truth, even when it hurts. Emily's voice steadied. Jason, I won't renounce you. I won't apologize for loving someone who shows me what real integrity looks like. It won't be easy, he warned. The media, the legal battles, your family. Nothing worth fighting forever is. Emily stepped closer. But we fight together, in the open. No more hiding. The sun was setting now, painting the church in deep oranges and purples. Jason thought of his mother, of her unwavering faith in doing what was right regardless of cost. Together then, he agreed, whatever comes next, we face it with truth. They walked out of the church side by side as the sun dipped below the horizon. No photographers waited outside, no reporters shouted questions. For this brief moment, they were simply two people choosing to stand in their truth. Come what may. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Jason's childhood home as Emily sat cross-legged on the worn leather couch, laptop balanced on her knees. Jason paced nearby, his suit jacket discarded hours ago, sleeve cuffs rolled up as he dictated another attempt at their opening paragraph. The events of the past week have raised questions about our relationship and my character, he said, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. No, that's too defensive. We need to start stronger. Emily's fingers paused over the keyboard. What if we begin with gratitude? Thank everyone who's shown support, especially the veterans who spoke up for you. Jason stopped pacing, considering. That feels right. More authentic. She typed quickly, speaking the words aloud. To those who have offered kindness and understanding during this challenging time, we extend our deepest gratitude. Your support reminds us that truth, even when difficult, deserves to be told with courage and clarity. Perfect. Jason settled beside her on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. The familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee brought back memories of quieter mornings, before everything exploded. Emily continued typing. Our relationship began 18 months ago at the Veterans Support Foundation Gala. We chose discretion not out of shame, but out of respect for both our professional responsibilities and my family's position. Should we mention the photos directly? Jason asked, frowning at the screen. We have to. Emily's voice was firm. If we dance around it, people will think we're hiding something worse. Her fingers moved across the keyboard again. The recently published photos were taken without our knowledge or consent. While we regret the invasion of privacy, we will not apologize for the genuine care and respect shown in them. Jason nodded slowly. Direct but dignified, like my mother would have handled it. They worked through the morning, crafting each sentence with careful consideration. Coffee cups accumulated on the side table as they debated word choices, tone, and how much personal detail to include. We need to address the charges, Emily said as the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed noon. But without accusing anyone specifically. Jason stood, stretching his stiff muscles. You're right. Let me try this. He dictated while Emily typed. The legal charges against me stem from a misunderstanding regarding internal company communications. I maintain my innocence and look forward to clearing my name through proper legal channels. Should we hint at knowing more? Emily asked, looking up at him. About Robert's involvement, or... She trailed off, unable to directly reference her grandmother's manipulation. No. Jason's voice was gentle but firm. We take the high road. Complete transparency about ourselves, but no accusations or blame. That's not who we are. They broke for a simple lunch of sandwiches eaten at the kitchen counter, both lost in thought. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hardwood floors as they returned to their task. Emily read their draft aloud, making small adjustments. The statement acknowledged their relationship, expressed regret for any pain caused to their families and colleagues, but stood firm in their commitment to truth and integrity. "Listen to this final part," she said, clearing her throat. "Moving forward, we choose openness over secrecy, truth over convenience, and love over fear. We ask for understanding as we navigate this challenging time, and pray that healing and reconciliation will follow honesty." Jason leaned back, exhaling slowly. "It feels right. Professional but personal, honest without being bitter." Emily saved the document and closed her laptop as evening approached. "We should sleep on it," she suggested. "Review it with fresh eyes tomorrow before releasing it." Agreed. Jason stood, helping Emily to her feet. "First thing tomorrow morning, before anyone can try to talk us out of it." They gathered their notes, electronic devices, and empty coffee cups. The statement was ready. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, they had done what needed to be done. Crafted their truth into words that could neither be twisted nor denied. Jason's finger hovered over the send button on his phone. Beside him in his childhood home's sunlit study, Emily squeezed his free hand. It was 10 a.m., the optimal time they'd chosen for maximum media impact. "Together?" Emily asked softly. Jason nodded. They pressed the button simultaneously, Emily on her laptop, Jason on his phone. Their carefully crafted statement went live across multiple platforms at once. For several minutes, they sat in complete silence, watching the initial reactions populate their screens. Emily's social media expertise had ensured maximum visibility. Their words appeared simultaneously on Jason's company website, their personal social channels, and through a respected PR newswire. "Look," Emily whispered, pointing to her screen. The first major response came from Derek Martinez, a decorated veteran who'd been at the shelter where Jason had served breakfast. His post included a photo of Jason in an apron, serving food with humility. "I served 2 tours overseas. I know character when I see it. Jason Cole showed up to serve veterans without cameras, without praise. That's the real man, not these headlines." The post was already gaining traction. Other veterans from the shelter began sharing similar stories. Jason's phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Chen, a board member. "Proud to stand with a CEO who chooses truth over image. Count on my continued support." Emily's social media monitoring tools showed their statement spreading rapidly. News outlets began picking up the story, most leading with "Cole and Harper break silence" headlines. The tone was notably different from the previous week's sensational coverage. "The veterans' shelter photos are trending," Emily noted, her professional instincts kicking in. "People are connecting with that authenticity. It's drowning out the scandal photos." Around noon, a respected business journal published an analysis piece. Cole's response demonstrates leadership through crisis. The article praised their transparency and highlighted Jason's continued community service despite personal challenges. They ordered lunch, but barely touched it, transfixed by the unfolding response. Emily's phone lit up with a text from her cousin Claire, the only family member who'd stood by her consistently. "So proud of you both. Mom's sharing your statement in her prayer group. You're changing minds." By mid-afternoon, several of Jason's longtime employees had posted their own stories of his integrity and leadership. A photo circulated of Jason helping an intern's grandmother move furniture on a weekend, years before he became CEO. Each genuine story of kindness chipped away at the scandal's harsh narrative. "Your mother would be proud," Emily said softly, watching Jason read through the responses. This is exactly what her letters taught, facing difficulty with grace. The response wasn't universally positive. Some commentators questioned their timing, speculated about hidden agendas, or dismissed it as PR spin. But for the first time, these voices were the minority. As evening approached, a surprise ally emerged. Rebecca Torres, a popular online advocate for women in business, posted a lengthy thread analyzing the media's treatment of Emily. "We claim to want women in leadership, then shame them for private relationships. Harper's professional accomplishments were erased by sensational coverage. Let's discuss the real double standard." The thread went viral, sparking important conversations about privacy, power, and gender bias in media coverage. Emily watched with professional appreciation as it shifted the narrative further. At sunset, they finally stepped away from their screens. Jason moved to the kitchen to make tea, a habit he'd learned from his mother for finding calm in chaos. Emily joined him, both physically and emotionally exhausted but lighter somehow. "For the first time," Jason said, passing Emily a steaming mug, "I feel like we're standing in our truth, not running from someone else's version of it." They settled onto the porch swing, watching the sky turn pink and purple. The day's digital chaos faded into cricket songs and soft breezes. Their phones, finally silenced, lay forgotten inside. Emily leaned her head on Jason's shoulder. The tension she'd carried since the scandal broke began to dissolve. They hadn't won yet. There were still legal battles ahead, family rifts to heal, and professional challenges to navigate. But they'd found their footing. Their truth was out there, untwisted and uncompromised. For the first time in what felt like ages, they sat in genuine peace. The night wrapped around them like a gentle blanket, offering the calm that comes not from hiding, but from standing firmly in one's truth. Jason's phone rang at 7:15 a.m. David Werner's name flashed on the screen. His attorney never called this early unless something was wrong. "Jason, we have a problem." David's voice was tight. "The prosecutor just filed additional charges. They're claiming obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and corporate fraud." Jason sat heavily on his kitchen stool, last night's peace evaporating. "That's impossible. We've been completely transparent." "Someone's blocking our evidence submissions. The documentation proving Robert Hale's involvement, mysteriously deemed inadmissible this morning. Every piece of exculpatory evidence is getting suppressed on technical grounds." Through the window, Jason watched the sun rising over the city. The same view that had filled him with pride just weeks ago. Now it felt like watching a fortress being built around him. "They're pushing for maximum penalties," David continued. "We're looking at potential prison time if this goes to trial. Significant prison time." Jason's hand tightened around his coffee mug. How is this happening? The truth was finally coming out. Someone with serious influence is pulling strings. This level of coordination, it's not normal prosecution behavior. Across town, Emily sat in her apartment's home office, preparing for a video call with her family's crisis management team. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. New charges filed against Cole. Presidential family distances themselves. The Zoom window opened to reveal stern faces. Thomas Reynolds, the family's longtime legal advisor, Patricia Mills, their political strategist, and James Howard, her grandfather's chief of staff. "Emily," Thomas began, his voice grave. "The situation has escalated beyond our control. Your grandmother's position in this administration is becoming untenable." Patricia leaned forward. "Poll numbers are dropping. The opposition is painting this as a moral failure of leadership. Your grandfather's legacy is at stake." "But we told the truth," Emily protested. "The public was starting to understand." "Understanding doesn't matter," James cut in. "Perception matters. Every day this continues, it erodes decades of careful political positioning." Emily felt her throat tighten. "So what exactly are you suggesting?" "You need to make a clean break," Patricia said. "Public statement denouncing Jason Cole. Personal distance. Show that family values and integrity matter more than a temporary relationship." "Temporary?" Emily's voice shook. You want me to lie? To abandon someone I love because it polls better? Thomas's expression softened slightly. Emily, think about your family, your grandmother's humanitarian work, your grandfather's legislative goals. All of it could collapse. Is one man worth destroying 3 generations of public service? Emily's phone lit up with a text from Jason. They're burying the evidence. Someone's making sure the truth never reaches a courtroom. She looked back at the screens, at these people who'd known her since childhood, now asking her to sacrifice her integrity for political expedience. The family needs you to do the right thing, James pressed. Sometimes personal happiness has to be sacrificed for the greater good. Emily felt tears threatening, but forced them back. The greater good isn't served by lying. Then you leave us no choice, Patricia said. Either you distance yourself from Cole, or we'll have to distance the family from you. Publicly. The threat hung in the air. Emily's mind flashed to holidays, family photos, the quiet moments between public appearances, all of it at risk. Think carefully, Thomas added. Once certain bridges are burned, they can't be rebuilt. The meeting ended, leaving Emily alone in her suddenly too quiet apartment. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, reporters still camped outside her building, waiting to document her every move. Her phone showed missed calls from her grandmother, probably ready with her own guilt-laden plea. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her floor as the weight of the choice settled over her. Love versus legacy. Truth versus family. Individual integrity versus generational responsibility. Emily sank onto her couch, finally allowing the tears to fall as the day's brutal reality sank in. Everything she and Jason had built yesterday was being systematically dismantled. Their moment of grace had been just that, a moment now shattered by the machinery of power and influence. The morning light crept across Jason's kitchen table, illuminating his clasped hands as he bowed his head in prayer. Steam rose from his untouched coffee, swirling in the golden rays like incense. His mother's worn Bible lay open before him, its pages marked with her familiar highlighting and notes in the margins. "Give me strength," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the dawn silence. "Not for myself, but to protect what matters. Truth, integrity, love." He traced his finger along a passage his mother had underlined years ago. "The truth shall set you free." The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he sat, preparing himself for imprisonment precisely because he refused to abandon truth. His phone buzzed softly. Another message from his legal team. Probably more dire news about evidence being suppressed or witnesses suddenly becoming unavailable. He left it face down, needing these few moments of peace before facing another day of battle. The kitchen still bore traces of simpler times. A photo on the fridge of his mother's last Christmas, her smile radiant despite her illness. Next to it, a candid shot of Emily laughing at something off camera, taken during one of their private moments before everything exploded. The contrast between past joy and present crisis made his chest ache. Jason stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city awakening below. Workers hurried along sidewalks, cars crawled through morning traffic. Life continued its routine march while his world teetered on the edge of collapse. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, remembering his mother's words during her final days. "Character isn't built in moments of comfort, Jason," she had said, holding his hand with surprising strength. "It's forged in fire, when doing right costs you everything." A sharp knock at his door pulled him from the memory. He opened it to find Emily standing there, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. Without a word, she stepped into his arms, holding him tightly as if trying to memorize the feeling. They're trying to force my hand, she murmured against his chest. The family advisors, the political team, they're threatening to publicly disown me if I don't denounce you. Jason led her to the kitchen table, pouring her a cup of coffee with hands that remained steady despite the weight in his heart. Tell me everything. As Emily detailed yesterday's ultimatum, Jason watched her face. The subtle clench of her jaw, the way she straightened her spine when describing their threats, the fierce light in her eyes that spoke of unshakable resolve, despite her fear. Your grandmother's reputation, your grandfather's legacy, they're using it all as leverage, she finished, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. They want me to tell the world that you manipulated me, that I was young and naive, that I've seen the error of my ways. Jason's coffee had grown cold, untouched. And if you refuse? Then I lose my family, not just politically, everything. Holidays, relationships, the connections I've had my entire life. Her voice cracked slightly. They're asking me to choose between truth and blood. Standing, Jason retrieved his mother's Bible, opening it to the marked passage. My mother used to say that truth isn't just about facts. It's about the courage to live honestly, even when the cost seems unbearable. Emily touched the highlighted verse gently. What are you going to do? I won't lie to save myself, he said quietly. I won't manufacture evidence or throw others under the bus. If that means prison, then I'll face it knowing I kept my integrity intact. Even if I could make this all go away by changing my story? Emily's question held no judgment, only understanding. Jason took her hands in his, meeting her gaze steadily. Especially then. We can lose everything. My freedom, your family connections, all of it. But we can't lose ourselves. I won't compromise truth, no matter the outcome. The White House press briefing room buzzed with anticipation. Emily Harper stood backstage, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Staffers rushed past with clipboards and concerned expressions, their whispers echoing off the walls. Through the curtain, she could hear the familiar shuffle of reporters taking their seats. Miss Harper, please reconsider, whispered Sarah Chen, her grandmother's most trusted media advisor. We've prepared a statement that will protect everyone's interests. She held out a sheet of paper filled with carefully crafted lies. Emily didn't even glance at it. I appreciate your concern, Sarah, but I know what I need to say. Your grandfather's approval ratings are dropping. The family's reputation is built on truth, Emily finished firmly, or at least it should be. The room fell silent as Emily stepped up to the podium. Camera shutters clicked rapidly, creating a sound like rainfall. She saw familiar faces in the crowd, reporters she'd known for years, some who'd covered her college graduation, others who'd written glowing pieces about her social media campaigns for various causes. Now they waited like hungry wolves, notepads ready. Emily smoothed her navy blazer, the one Jason had complimented during their third date, and leaned toward the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I'll be making a brief statement and won't be taking questions at this time. She'd practiced this moment in front of her bathroom mirror, but the reality felt different. Heavier, the weight of generations of Harper family legacy pressed down on her shoulders. Over the past weeks, there has been intense speculation about my relationship with Jason Cole and the circumstances surrounding recent events. I've been advised to distance myself from this situation, to deny, to redirect blame. Emily paused, making eye contact with several reporters. I will not do that. A murmur rippled through the room. In her peripheral vision, she saw Sarah Chen close her eyes in defeat. Jason Cole is a man of integrity who has treated me with nothing but respect and kindness. Our relationship, while private, was built on mutual trust and understanding. The leaked photos were a violation of our privacy, and the subsequent charges against him are based on manipulated evidence. The murmur grew louder. Hands shot into the air, but Emily continued steadily. I stand here today not as the president's granddaughter, but as a woman who refuses to participate in the destruction of a good man's character. I will not denounce Jason Cole. I will not pretend our relationship was anything other than what it was: honest, caring, and genuine. Camera flashes intensified. Emily could practically see tomorrow's headlines forming in the reporters' minds. To those who would pressure me to lie for political expediency, I respectfully decline. To those who would threaten my place in my family, I love them dearly, but I cannot sacrifice truth for comfort. And to those who would question my judgment, I have never been more certain of any decision in my life. Emily straightened her shoulders, channeling the quiet strength she'd always admired in Jason. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. The room erupted in shouted questions as Emily stepped away from the podium. She walked off stage with measured steps, ignoring the chaos behind her. Sarah Chen fell into step beside her, phone already buzzing with incoming calls. The First Lady is requesting an immediate meeting, Sarah said tightly. Please tell my grandmother I'll speak with her tomorrow. I need some time. The drive home felt surreal. Her phone lit up with messages, some supportive, others expressing disappointment or anger. Emily turned it off, watching the familiar streets of Washington pass by her car window. The city looked different somehow, as if her public stand had altered even the way sunlight fell on the buildings. When she finally reached her apartment, exhaustion hit her like a physical wave. She kicked off her heels and sank onto her couch, still in her blazer. The setting sun painted her walls in shades of orange and pink, a peaceful contrast to the day's intensity. Emily didn't regret her choice. The weight of family expectations had lifted, replaced by something lighter, the freedom of unwavering truth. As night settled over the city, she remained on her couch, tired but at peace with her decision. Margaret Harper sat in her private study, the warm glow of her desk lamp creating a small circle of light in the darkness. The White House felt unusually quiet at this late hour. She pulled Emily's old prayer journal from her drawer, a worn pink notebook with butterfly stickers peeling from its cover. She hadn't looked at it in years. Finding it earlier while searching for documents had stopped her cold. Now, after Emily's public statement, Margaret's hands trembled as she opened it. The childish handwriting brought an ache to her chest. Emily at 12, pouring her heart out to God. Dear God, please help me be brave like Grandma. She always knows the right thing to say. I want to make her proud, but sometimes it's hard to know what's true and what's just what people want to hear. Margaret's throat tightened. She turned the page. Today in Sunday school we learned about bearing false witness. Mrs. Peterson said that telling lies hurts God's heart. I don't want to hurt God's heart, but Grandma says sometimes we have to be diplomatic? I'm not sure what that means exactly. Coffee grew cold beside her as Margaret continued reading. Each entry revealed a young girl wrestling with truth and expectations, trying to reconcile her grandmother's lessons about image with her own developing moral compass. Dear God, I saw Grandma tell a reporter something that wasn't completely true today. When I asked her about it, she said sometimes protecting the family means being careful with words. But my heart felt funny about it. Is that you telling me something? Margaret's hands shook harder. She remembered that day, a minor scandal involving a distant cousin. She'd handled it smoothly, or so she'd thought. She hadn't known Emily was watching, hadn't realized how her actions were shaping a young conscience. The entries continued through Emily's teen years, showing her gradual understanding of the complex world she'd been born into. God, please help me find my voice. Everyone wants me to be something different, poised like Grandma, diplomatic like Dad, passionate like Mom. But I think you made me to be honest most of all. Is that okay? Tears splashed onto the page. Margaret quickly dabbed them away, not wanting to smear the precious words. Dear God, today Grandma taught me about legacy. She says our family name carries responsibility. That makes sense. But doesn't truth matter more than reputation? Jesus wasn't worried about his reputation. Help me understand. The wisdom in those simple words struck Margaret like a physical blow. She thought of her actions over the past weeks, the calculated manipulation, using Robert Hale's ambition against him, all to protect a legacy that Emily had questioned even as a child. Sometimes I worry that Grandma is lonely. She works so hard to keep everything perfect. Does she know you love her even when things aren't perfect? Margaret closed the journal, unable to read more. The weight of years of careful manipulation, of choosing appearance over authenticity, settled on her shoulders. She thought of Emily's strength today at the press conference. Strength that came not from calculation, but from simple devotion to truth. The ornate clock on her desk showed 2 a.m. Outside her window, the White House grounds lay peaceful under moonlight. How many decisions had she made in this room, always convinced she was protecting something vital? But what had she really protected? What had she taught her granddaughter, despite Emily's prayers for clarity? Margaret picked up her phone, then set it down. Picked it up again. The right thing to do was crystallizing in her mind, but the thought of it made her hands shake. A public confession would undo decades of careful image management. It would expose her manipulation, admit her fear, reveal her willingness to sacrifice love for appearance. Yet Emily's childhood words echoed in her mind. Doesn't truth matter more than reputation? Standing at her window, Margaret watched the first hints of dawn color the sky. She thought of Jason Cole, whose reputation she'd tried to destroy. Of Emily, whose integrity had remained unshaken. Of her own soul, weighted down by years of diplomatic deceptions. The choice became clear. Not easy, but clear. She would confess. To the press, to the public, but first to Emily and Jason. The cost would be enormous, but the cost of continuing to live behind carefully constructed walls suddenly seemed far greater. Margaret sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the decision, but certain it was right. The morning light grew stronger, promising a new day, and with it, the challenge of facing the truth she'd spent a lifetime avoiding. The federal building loomed before Margaret Harper like a steel and glass monolith in the crisp morning air. Her security detail formed a protective circle around her, but for once, she didn't take comfort in their presence. Her designer handbag felt unusually heavy, weighted down by Emily's childhood journal and a manila folder containing evidence of her orchestration of the leak. "Ma'am, are you sure about this?" her chief of security asked quietly as they approached the entrance. Margaret straightened her spine, channeling decades of public poise even as her heart raced. "Yes, Charles. Quite sure." The investigation room was deliberately austere, a stark contrast to the elegant White House spaces she typically occupied. 2 federal agents sat across from her, their expressions carefully neutral as they recorded her statement. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making everyone look slightly ill. "Mrs. Harper, you understand you're here voluntarily?" Agent Roberts asked, her pen poised above a legal pad. "I do." Margaret's voice remained steady, though her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've come to provide evidence regarding the leaked photographs of my granddaughter Emily Harper and Jason Cole." She removed documents from her folder, laying them precisely on the table. "These are emails between myself and Robert Hale, Chief Operating Officer of Cole Enterprises. They detail my manipulation of him to orchestrate the leak." Agent Roberts raised an eyebrow, but maintained her professional demeanor. "You're aware that making this statement could result in serious legal consequences?" "I am." Margaret's throat tightened, but she pressed on. "I used my position and influence to pressure Mr. Hale. I convinced him that exposing the relationship would protect the company's interests. In truth, I wanted to separate Emily from Mr. Cole. I believed I was protecting our family's legacy. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of detailed questions. Margaret explained how she'd first learned of the relationship, her initial surveillance of Jason Cole, the careful way she'd planted seeds of doubt in Robert Hale's mind about Jason's leadership. She described each calculated move, each manipulation, watching as the agent's notes grew longer. And Mr. Hale's subsequent statement about protecting the company was exactly what I'd led him to believe he was doing. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. He was my unwitting instrument. The true responsibility lies with me. By noon, news of Margaret Harper's presence at the federal building had leaked to the press. Cameras crowded the entrance, reporters speculating about her unprecedented voluntary meeting with investigators. Inside, Margaret continued her confession, feeling lighter with each truth revealed. "One final question, Mrs. Harper," Agent Roberts said, looking up from her notes. "Why come forward now?" Margaret withdrew Emily's journal from her bag, running her fingers over its worn cover. "Because my granddaughter taught me something I should have learned long ago, that legacy isn't built on appearances. It's built on truth." The afternoon sun was high when Margaret emerged from the building. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, voices shouting questions. For the first time in her public life, Margaret Harper stepped forward without a prepared statement, without calculating every word's impact. "I have provided federal investigators with evidence of my role in orchestrating the leak of private photographs involving my granddaughter Emily Harper and Jason Cole," she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly hushed crowd. "I acted out of misguided desire to protect my family's reputation, and in doing so, I betrayed the very values that reputation was built upon." Questions exploded around her, but Margaret continued, "I offer no excuses, only the truth, and my deep regret for the pain I've caused." As evening approached, every major network carried her confession. Social media exploded with reactions, analysts debated the implications, and the story of Margaret Harper's fall from grace dominated headlines nationwide. In homes across America, people watched footage of the First Lady's mother-in-law admitting to orchestrating one of the year's biggest scandals. But Margaret wasn't watching the coverage. She sat in her private study, Emily's journal open before her, waiting for the calls she knew would come. From the president, from her son, from Emily. The setting sun cast long shadows across her desk, and for the first time in decades, Margaret Harper felt truly seen. The pale morning light had barely touched the city skyline when federal agents surrounded Robert Hale's brownstone. He was still adjusting his tie, preparing for another day of damage control at Cole Enterprises, when the forceful knocks echoed through his home. "Federal agents, open up, Mr. Hale." Robert's hands trembled as he opened the door, finding himself face to face with a team of stern-faced agents, warrant in hand. The same cameras that had captured Jason's arrest weeks ago now turned their hungry lenses on Robert, documenting his fall from grace in high definition. "Robert Hale, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and corporate fraud," the lead agent announced, securing handcuffs around Robert's wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin, a stark contrast to the expensive suit he wore. Across town, Jason sat in his attorney's office, watching the arrest unfold on a mounted television. The evidence Margaret had provided painted a damning picture. Emails, phone records, and financial transactions showing Robert's willing participation in the scheme. But more than that, it revealed the depth of his betrayal. Long before Margaret's manipulation, Robert had been siphoning company funds, preparing for a hostile takeover attempt. The investigation uncovered much more than just the photo leak, Jason's attorney explained, spreading documents across his desk. Mr. Hale has been embezzling for years. Mrs. Harper's confession led investigators to dig deeper into his activities. Jason leaned back in his chair, feeling a complex mix of emotions. "All this time, I trusted him, mentored him, treated him like family. The evidence suggests he's been plotting against you since before the Harper situation. Margaret's scheme just gave him the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Outside the federal building, reporters swarmed as Robert was led inside. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his face ashen. The man who had stood so confidently in board meetings now stumbled, shoulders hunched under the weight of his exposed deceit. "Mr. Hale, did you act alone? Was this personal against Jason Cole? How long have you been stealing from the company?" Robert kept his head down, but his expression spoke volumes, the look of a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. In the early afternoon, Emily arrived at Jason's attorney's office. She'd been keeping her distance publicly while the investigation unfolded, but now she moved quickly to his side, taking his hand as they watched the news coverage together. "The federal prosecutor is dropping all charges against you," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "They're holding a press conference at 3. Jason nodded, still processing the morning's events. "I keep thinking about all the times Robert sat across from me, planning this, all while I was promoting him, trusting him with more responsibility." Emily turned to face him. "You saw the best in him. That's not a weakness, Jason." The afternoon press conference was brief but definitive. The federal prosecutor stood at the podium, cameras flashing as she made the announcement. "Based on new evidence and testimony, all charges against Jason Cole have been dropped. Our investigation has revealed that Mr. Cole was the victim of a coordinated effort to damage both his personal reputation and his company." The prosecutor detailed the evidence against Robert, explaining how the investigation had uncovered years of financial misconduct beyond the photo leak scandal. As she spoke, clerks were already filing the official documents dismissing Jason's case. By late afternoon, Jason received the formal notification that all charges had been dropped. He sat at his desk, holding the document that restored his legal freedom, though the emotional weight of recent weeks still lingered. His phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Justice served, but I think this is about more than justice." Jason looked out his office window at the city below, remembering his mother's words about forgiveness being stronger than vengeance. Robert's betrayal still hurt, but Jason felt no triumph in his former mentor's downfall, only a quiet resolution to lead differently, to build something stronger from the ashes of betrayal. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his desk as Jason finally set aside the dismissal papers. The legal battle was over, but the real work of rebuilding, both his company and his life, was just beginning. The evening sun cast a golden glow across the hotel conference room as journalists settled into their seats, cameras at the ready. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, a stark contrast to the hostile energy of weeks before. Jason stood behind the curtain, adjusting his tie more from habit than necessity. Emily touched his arm gently. "Are you ready?" He looked at her, taking in her quiet strength. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back naturally. No artifice, no political polish, just Emily, choosing truth over image. "I've been practicing what Mom would say," Jason admitted, pulling out a worn letter from his pocket. "She always told me that true strength isn't in never falling, but in how you rise." Emily smiled, smoothing his lapel. "Your mother would be proud of you today." The PR team signaled it was time. Jason and Emily walked to the podium together, facing the sea of cameras. The flashes were just as bright as the day of his arrest, but this time, Jason stood tall, Emily's hand steady in his. "Good evening," Jason began, his voice clear and measured. "I'm here today not as a CEO or a public figure, but as a man who has learned profound lessons about truth, pride, and redemption." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "When this scandal broke, my first instinct was to protect Emily, to protect my company, to protect my reputation. But my late mother taught me that true protection comes through truth, not control. Emily stepped forward. We chose to hide our relationship initially out of respect for privacy, not shame. That choice gave others the power to twist our story. Today, we're reclaiming that story with honesty. The reporters leaned forward as Jason continued. I've spent the past week serving at a veterans shelter, remembering what really matters. I've read letters from my mother about integrity. I've learned that a man's character isn't measured by his ability to avoid criticism, but by his response to it. We're not here to accuse or blame, Emily added, her voice strong. My grandmother's actions came from a place of misguided love. Mr. Hale's betrayal reflects deeper wounds that money and success can't heal. We're here to speak truth and choose forgiveness. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Cole, will you be returning as CEO? I'll be taking a temporary step back, Jason replied. My company needs leadership focused on ethical restoration, not just profit. I'll be working with the board to implement stronger oversight and establish a foundation supporting veterans and victims of public shaming. Ms. Harper, another called out, how has this affected your relationship with your family? Emily's grip tightened slightly on the podium. Family is complicated. Love sometimes expresses itself in wrong ways. My grandmother and I are beginning a journey of healing, not for the cameras, but in private, where real change happens. Jason wrapped up the formal statement. Success built on image is fragile. Character built on truth endures. We're grateful for the support we've received, especially from the veterans who reminded me what real strength looks like. The questions continued, but there was a different tone now. The reporters weren't hunting for scandal. They were witnessing restoration. Jason and Emily answered with candor and grace, neither defensive nor bitter. As the conference wound down, Jason shared a final thought. My mother used to say that wealth can buy comfort, but only truth brings peace. I lost sight of that somewhere between balance sheets and board meetings. This journey has been about finding it again. Emily added softly, and about discovering that love grows stronger in the light of truth. The cameras continued flashing as they stepped away from the podium. But now, for the first time since the scandal broke, they walked openly together. Their fingers intertwined, heads held high. They moved toward the exit. The reporters called out final questions, but their voices faded into the background. In that moment, as they walked hand in hand, the headlines and charges and public scrutiny seemed to dim. What remained was simpler, stronger. Two people who had chosen truth over appearance, forgiveness over bitterness, love over fear. The cameras captured their departure, but they weren't watching the lenses anymore. They had found something the cameras couldn't capture, peace that comes from standing in truth, whatever the cost. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Coal Industries boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished table. Jason stood at the head, his posture relaxed but purposeful. The tension that had knotted his shoulders during the scandal had eased, replaced by quiet resolve. The board members filed in, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Some had stood by him throughout the crisis, while others had pushed for his immediate removal. Now, they all waited to hear what direction their company would take. Thank you for coming, Jason began, his voice steady. Yesterday, Emily and I spoke publicly about truth and accountability. Today, I'm here to put those words into action. He placed his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. I'm stepping down temporarily as CEO, not because of pressure or obligation, but because this company needs to rebuild its ethical foundation, and that starts with leadership. Murmurs rippled through the room. Sarah Chen, one of his longest-serving board members, spoke up. Jason, the stock has stabilized since the charges were dropped. The public response to your press conference was positive. Is this step necessary? It's not about the stock price, Sarah. Jason smiled gently. My mother built her cleaning business on two principles: honest work and caring for people. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that balance. He moved around the table, making eye contact with each member. During these past weeks, I've spent time serving breakfast at a veterans shelter. I've listened to stories of men and women who lost everything but found dignity in truth and service. Their resilience taught me more about leadership than any business school. Marcus Thompson, a newer board member, leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? Jason pulled out a detailed proposal and began distributing copies. A 3-month transition period. I've selected Andrea Martinez from our ethics department to serve as interim CEO. She has both the business acumen and moral compass this company needs right now. He continued as they reviewed the documents. We'll establish new oversight protocols, strengthen our ethical guidelines, and create transparent reporting structures. But more importantly, we're going to refocus on what matters. Not just profits, but people. The discussion continued for hours, diving into specifics of the transition plan. Some board members raised concerns about market perception, others about operational continuity. Jason addressed each question with patience and clarity, his responses reflecting both business wisdom and renewed purpose. By early afternoon, they had reached consensus. Jason would step back for 3 months, working closely with Andrea to ensure a smooth transition while focusing on developing new initiatives. As the board members filed out, Sarah lingered behind. Your mother would be proud, Jason. This isn't just damage control. It's real change. Thank you, Sarah. He gathered his papers, thinking of the letter from his mother he'd read just that morning. Sometimes you have to step back to move forward. Later that afternoon, Emily met him in his office as he packed up some personal items. Her eyes fell on the family photo he was carefully wrapping, Jason as a child, with his mother outside their small house. How did the board take it? She asked, helping him organize files. Better than expected? I think everyone's ready for a fresh start. He paused, pulling out a notebook filled with ideas. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. They sat together on the office couch as Jason shared his vision for a foundation, one that would combine their experiences and skills. The veterans I've met, the people who've reached out to us during this whole ordeal, there's such a need for support when people face public crises or lose their dignity. Emily's eyes lit up. A place that offers both practical help and restoration of dignity. We could provide legal support, media guidance, mental health resources, and a chance to serve others, Jason added. The healing I found at the shelter wasn't just about receiving help. It was about giving it. They spent the next few hours brainstorming, their excitement growing as the foundation took shape on paper. They would focus on 2 main areas: supporting veterans transitioning to civilian life and helping individuals rebuilding after public crises. We'll need a strong board, Emily noted, making lists. People who understand both public pressure and genuine service. And partnerships with existing organizations, Jason added. There's so much good work already happening. We just need to connect and strengthen it. As they worked, the city lights began twinkling outside his office window. The foundation was more than just their next project. It was a way to transform their challenging journey into something meaningful for others. Emily stood in the White House's private garden, her grandmother's favorite retreat. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured paths where Margaret often walked while contemplating matters of state. Today, those paths would witness something more personal than politics. Margaret sat on a wrought iron bench, her usual commanding presence softened by something Emily hadn't seen before: vulnerability. The First Lady's hands, normally steady as she gestured through speeches or gracefully worked a room, trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. "Emily." Margaret's voice was quiet, lacking its characteristic authority. "Thank you for coming." Emily remained standing, her arms crossed not in defiance but in protection. The garden's roses, carefully tended and pristine, reminded her of how her grandmother had always tried to control everything, shaping life as precisely as these cultivated blooms. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times, Margaret admitted, looking down at her clasped hands. "But prepared speeches feel wrong now. They're part of what brought us here, always calculating, always managing perceptions." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, carrying the sweet scent of late summer blooms. Emily watched a butterfly land on nearby lavender, its wings opening and closing with delicate purpose. "I don't expect you to understand everything I did," Margaret continued. "I'm not sure I understand it myself anymore. I convinced myself I was protecting our family's legacy, the presidency, your future." She paused, meeting Emily's eyes directly. "But I was really protecting my own fears." Emily shifted her weight, processing her grandmother's words. The woman before her seemed smaller somehow, more human than the formidable figure who had orchestrated their pain. "I've spent my whole life building walls," Margaret said, her voice catching. "Perfect appearances, perfect control, perfect legacy. But watching you these past weeks, your courage to stand in truth, your grace under pressure, I realized I've been suffocating the very things that matter most." A tear slipped down Margaret's cheek, quickly wiped away with practiced discretion. "I read your childhood journal," she confessed. "Your prayers for truth, for love to win over fear, they were so pure, so faithful. And Her voice broke. "I betrayed that faith when I should have protected it." Emily finally moved, sitting beside her grandmother but maintaining a small distance. The iron bench was cool through her dress, grounding her in the moment. "I'm not asking for immediate trust," Margaret continued. "I know that must be earned back slowly, if at all. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm simply asking—" She drew a shaky breath. "For a chance to learn from you, to understand the kind of strength that comes from truth rather than control." The garden fell quiet except for distant birds and the subtle rustle of leaves. Emily studied her grandmother's profile, seeing for the first time the weight of years spent maintaining perfect facades. "I'm sorry, Emily. Truly, deeply sorry. Not because I was caught, not because of the political fallout, but because I hurt you. I hurt Jason. I let fear corrupt love, and there's no excuse for that." Emily felt tears welling in her own eyes, remembering countless childhood moments in this very garden. Tea parties with perfectly arranged cookies, lessons in poise and protocol, her grandmother's proud smile at every small achievement. The love had always been there, just twisted by expectations and fear. "I understand fear," Emily said softly. "I understand wanting to protect what matters. But Grandma—" She turned to face Margaret fully. "Love has to be stronger than fear. Truth has to matter more than appearance." Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. "You've always known that, haven't you? While I was teaching you about proper protocols and public image, you were teaching me about authentic grace." Emily reached out slowly and took her grandmother's hand. It wasn't full forgiveness yet. That would take time and continued proof of change. But it was an opening, a small bridge across the chasm of hurt between them. "Maybe," Emily said gently, "we can learn together now, about real strength, real legacy." Margaret squeezed her hand, gratitude and hope mixing with her tears. In the late afternoon light, grandmother and granddaughter sat together, letting truth and grace begin their healing work.